So let's continue to see how we will implement this when we display in our IDE. So like earlier we already have the show array with the sum of each row. So that's why we finish. But what we will do the next function is we are not only show the row and the sum of each row, we also show in the column. So that's why this function, after we finish, they will display really like this. Like earlier we have, right? We already have the sum for each row. But in order to display the sum of each column, we need to be careful. The column is, you see, the same column, the second dimension y, but different x. So on the other hand, they cannot be finished in one inner loop. They have to finish in the nested for loop. So when y equal to 0, I add 159 into another one total, then 2, 6, 10 in another total. So each time I have multiple total concurrently happen. So that's why here, the first thing, when I want to update to display the column, before we only have one sum. So this sum can be for one inner loop to display, to add the total for the same row or the number. But now when we want to display for the column, because this column, you see, they have one total, two total, three total, four total. At the same time, I need to accumulate it. So that's why here we need to declare another total actually that's outside the for loop. So this total actually is not only one value. This one is a column total array. And this array actually will contain the total for each column. So supposedly we can just, if for only each column, I can have the same number of columns. But also at the end, you can see we also have the grand total. So that's the +1 we have. And also since each number, they are the total, they are the sum. So they need to initialize to 0. So that's why I have an array column total. Actually, this total is for each column total placeholder for the number. So the +1 actually is for here, the grand total. So continue after we declare that in our outer loop. Okay, so here you can see I declare that in the outer loop. Then this one is different because the sum I only happen in each iteration. And also after each inner loop finish, I can recalculate the sum. So this sum, if we want to declare outside or inside, doesn't matter. But only this column total we have to declare outside because they need to start from the for loop here. Okay, so then you can see here, when I want to calculate the column total, right? The column total, each one is, they have the constantly the same thing. In the inner loop, I try to access the element one by one. Okay, so this one, if you have the same x, okay, so then I have the y to accumulate to the sum. But now here, I have the column total. Okay, so here my column total is an array. So this array, which number I should use, actually is according to my y. Because you can see here, the same y, they will add to this y. Because the column is the second dimension. So that's why they're using the y. So then the same thing right here. When we add the y, so then we need to depend on currently which element I'm adding. So I just need to add this current value to y total. Because according to this one, the same, they will add to the correct total. So then after we're done here, so that's why each element, they will find their correct column total. Good. So this column total actually finish is, you see, 159 add to 15. So this one go to this total. So those, the same column number go to the correct total. But then you can find out, actually I have the other one is the grand total, right? So the grand total actually came from each sum. But the sum of the row cannot get this value until I finish the inner loop. So that's why this number I need to accumulate after I have my sum ready. And here, this one is, remember, we on purpose to make our 1D array is columns plus 1. So that's why here, each sum of the row I will add into the last element in the array. So this one actually is accumulate each row of the sum to my last element from my column total. So after this one, I finish to fill out the column total for each one. Since the column total cannot be get until we finish the for loop, so that's why when we try to display each column total, I need to wait until I finish this nested for loop. So then I have another one for loop to display the total for each column. So that's why here we just need to add another for loop. We have another for loop only display the column total. So then after each one, the same thing, each one I set width equal to 4. After I done for the for loop, then we just need to add a new line. So then here we have our display the array but with the sum of the row and the sum of each column. So then here in the main function, that's display the first one. You see the first one we display to display the content of the array with the sum of each row. So then that's called the function again. So we will display the sum of the row and the column from that function. So I separate in two functions. I just want you to make sure the difference between each function for the purpose. So that's why after we run the program, you can see here, the first time I display the two array, we only have the content and the total at the end for each row. So that's the first two tables. But then the second time when we display again, we are not only have the content for the array, and we have the row for each, total for each row. And at the end, we have the total for each column. So the same thing that's for the second table. So we can see here, you see the last one, because the grand total is really big. So set the W equal to 4 possibly is not enough. So if you want, we can change the at the end, the last one. So when we display each number, then we can make them a little bigger. Maybe we do each one is 6. So then you don't see the value, they will connect to each other. Okay, so if we change to 6 to display again, so then you can see here, at least they are not touched together. Okay, not so crowded. So that's our sum of each row or sum of each column, how to do that. I'll make sure you will practice with that. Of course, we will have this test file for you to practice. So what we showed you earlier actually is very complicated. You need to get the total for each row and the total for each column. But sometimes if we just want to have the grand total only, I just want the grand total only, then actually we can just have our nested for loop. Okay, so here actually earlier we say you have a total for each row, total for each column. But if we just want to have the sum of all the array, the grand total declared outside is equal to 0. So then here you see they have nested for loop. So each time they just need to add all the elements to this grand total. So you can see the different thing for this total from what we have for the total for each row is If the total for each row, they need to be initialized the total again equal to 0 before we start each iteration for the inner loop. But the grand total, actually, you just need to have one single total. This total is for all the elements, they all add on to here. So this one actually is the grand sum of each element for the array. So this example, actually, we can see in the source file from example 8. So example 8 actually is we have different, in the company, they have the sales for different division and also for different quarter. So that's me, you see here, for example, in your company, they have 3 different division. So we have 4 quarters in a year. So then you see here, if I have 2-dimensional array, so the value for the division, different quarter of the value for the division 1, they will be in the first row. So then the second row will contain the second division for all their quarter cells. So of course we have 3 rows, so they have 1, 2, 3. And sometimes when we have our 2-dimensional array, we can either initialize what we have before, like this. But sometimes we also can allow the user to give us the input. So this example also show you if I just want the user input. So then how should I write our message to display in the console? So this program will calculate the grand total for all cells. So then you need to enter the following cells information. So that's why here, actually what we do is we will do from each division, they will display their quarter cells. So that's why you will see here, I have the outer loop is each division. So each division, let's display division 1, then all their quarter cells. So that's why we will display 4 times. So then we can enter the first iteration for the first outer loop. We will enter the 4 quarter cells from division 1, then division 2, division 3. So after we get the user input, so then we will have our grand total to calculate. So that's why you can see here, the grand total, actually we just need to using the 2 for loop. Then earlier, we already declared a total cells equal to 0. So that's why we add all the cells equal to the total cell. So then at the end, you just display the total cell for the company. So you can see here, this example, we only ask the user input. So then we didn't really display the content. At the end, we only display the total cell. So that's why that's the sample output. You can see here earlier from our nested for loop, we just get the user input for each division in the quarter cells. So here is the user input. Then you have division 2 and the user input. And division 3, the user input for each quarter. So then you have your total cell. Do not just look at this code. So post the video, so then you can run this one on your IDE. So then you can see here, in our IDE, we run example 8. Like earlier we said, we declare a 2-dimensional array. We declare the total cell equal to 0, so that's the initial value we add. So the first nested for loop, we will display the user input for 1 division 4 quarter cell 1 by 1. So then the second nested for loop, we just calculate the total cell. So then we can display at the end with the 2 decimal display. So the most important thing, you need to try to see how your output look like. So that's why you can see here, they just tell you the program calculate total cell for all company division. So tell me the division 1, the first quarter cell. So then you can just try to enter. So then the second quarter. Then we enter all the value for the first division. Then you see the second one. The same thing for your 4 quarter. I just try to type some value in there. So then your quarter, division 3 for the 4 quarter. then you have grand total.